The next chart. And this was all out there since '05. World production of conventional oil will reach a maximum and decline thereafter. They said that with quite some confidence because it happened in the United States, unquestionably. And the United States has to be a microcosm of the world. That maximum is called the peak. A number of confident forecasters projected peaking within a decade. Others contend it will occur later. Well, it occurred well within the decade. The world has never faced a problem like this. It's unprecedented. Without massive mitigation, more than a decade before the fact, the problem will be pervasive and will not be temporary. Previous energy transitions, wood to coal and coal to oil, were gradual and evolutionary. Oil peaking will be abrupt and revolutionary. This was in '05. Your government didn't like what that report said, so they just ignored it. The same year, another report, the Army Corps of Engineers, and I have several quotes. The current price of oil is $45 to $57 a barrel and is expected to stay that way for several years. Wow. Even the experts get it wrong sometimes, don't they? Oil prices may go significantly higher, and some have predicted prices ranging up to $180 a barrel in a few years. Well, it reached 147, but it didn't reach 180 because the economy collapsed and the demand for oil went down, and with the demand down, the price went down. The next chart is another quote from this same study. Petroleum experts Colin Campbell, Jean Laherrère, Brian Ferry, Robin Blankert, Richard Dunkert, Youngquist, Albert Bartlett, my namesake. I wish I had some of his genes. He has given a great speech on energy. Google for Albert Bartlett an energy speech. He's probably given this speech about 2,000 times now. It's the best speech I've ever heard on energy. Have estimated that a peak in conventional oil production will occur around 2005. It occurred in 2006. They didn't miss it very much. The next statement, this is not from the Corps of Engineers, but it's a statement from Condoleezza Rice, which I thought was a very insightful statement. We do have to do something about the energy problem. I can tell you that nothing has really taken me aback more as Secretary of State than the way that the politics of energy is, I will use the word warping diplomacy around the world. We have simply got to do something about the warping now of diplomatic effort by the all-out rush for energy supply. Good advice. What did we do? What did we do? The next chart is another quote from the Corps of Engineers. Oil is the most important form of energy in the world today. Historically, no other energy source equals oil intrinsic qualities of extractability, transportability, versatility, and cost. The qualities enabled oil to take over from coal as a frontline energy source for the industrialized world in the middle of the 20th century are as relevant today as they were then, all ignored by your government. The next chart is another quote from this same study by the Corps of Engineers. Well, they're quoting Jean Laherrère. And you know, our energy department, and just go back and look historically. You can Google and find them, I'm sure. Their projections of what energy was going to be available to us. And this is Laherrère's quote on that. The USGS estimate implies a 5-fold increase in discovery rate. You have to have that much discovery rate to keep up with what we're using, for which no evidence is presented. Such an improvement in performance is in fact utterly implausible, given the great technological achievements of the industry over the past 20 years, the worldwide search, and the deliberate efforts to find the largest remaining prospect. We're finding more oil. One of the big finds in the Gulf of Mexico was under 7,000 feet of water, 30,000 feet of rock. And a big discovery of oil is 10 billion barrels. We use 84 million barrels a day. That means in 12 days, we use 1 billion barrels of oil. That's a staggering number. What that means is if you found 10 billion barrels of oil, and you can get it all out, that will last the world 120 days. Big deal. The next chart. This is Shell oil. By the year 2100, the world's energy system will be radically different from today's. The world's current predicament limits our maneuvering room. We're experiencing a step change in the growth rate of energy demand, and Shell estimates that after 2015, supplies of easy-to-access oil and gas will no longer keep up with demand. That didn't wait till 2015. It happened in '06. But he was generally right. This was of an absolute certainty going to happen. The next chart presents us with a dilemma that many people are concerned about. It's a national security issue. We have only 2% of the world's oil reserves. We use 25% of the world's oil. We're only a little less than 5% of the world's population. We import about 2/3% of what we need. Many people rightfully believe that having only 2% of the world's reserves and using 25% of the world's oil and importing 2/3 of what we use presents an undesirable national security risk. As a matter of fact, there were 30 prominent scientists and thought leaders who wrote a letter to President Bush saying exactly that. Notice that although we have only 2% of the world's oil, we're producing 8% of the world's oil. We have drilled more oil wells than all the rest of the world put together. It's like several kids sharing a soda, and they've got half a dozen straws in one soda. You can suck it down pretty quick, can't you? And that's where we are with oil. The next chart is an interesting one. And what this chart shows us is the energy density of these various types of fuel. And notice that oil, aviation fuel, boy, that's refined, isn't it? It's got lots of energy. Natural gas, which is why natural gas is a great fuel for cars if you can have the infrastructure to support that. But notice all these other sources of energy. The energy density in oil is just incredible. There is nothing else. There's no readily available source of energy that comes even close to the energy density in oil as we look at alternatives. The next chart. And some people will tell you, yeah, I know oil is short, but who cares? Because we are king of coal. We're the Saudi Arabia of coal. We have enough coal to last us for a long time. I've had members tell me that it'll last us 500 years. A commonly quoted amount of coal is we have 250 years supply of coal at current use rates. Note when people tell you how much of something we have at current use rates. Think about what increasing use will do to that. If we increase the use of coal only 2%, and we'll increase the use more than that as we run down on oil, and we have learned to do what Hitler did and South Africa did to create oil and gas from coal. Just a 2% growth doubles in 35 years. That's not enough growth to keep our stock market happy. It wants more than 2%. But 2% doubles in 35 years. It's 4 times bigger in 70 years. It's 8 times bigger in 105 years. It's 16 times bigger in 140 years. So that 250 years of coal, this line, shrinks to just 50 years of coal. Well, 85 if you use it as coal, but if you're going to use some of the energy to convert it to a gas or a liquid, now it shrinks to 50 years. So your 250 years shrinks to 50 years if you have only 2% increase in its use, and if you convert it to a gas or a liquid. But the reality is that there is no way you can avoid sharing that coal or the gas or oil you get from it with the world. Because if you use oil or gas that you've made from your coal, then somebody else buys the oil from Saudi Arabia or Hugo Chavez. So the reality is that you have no alternative but to share it with the world. We use 1/4 of the world's oil, so that means it will last the world 12.5 years. Now, the National Academy of Sciences says we haven't looked at the the coal reserves for a long while, since the 70s. And they think we probably have about 100 years of coal at current use rates. But even if we had 250 years at current use rates, just 2% growth shrinks to 85. Convert it to gas or liquid, it drops to 50, and you have no alternative but to share it with the world, so it drops to 12.5 years. The next chart shows us something very interesting. What it shows us is that we don't have to look to a decreased quality of life if we're using less energy. This is the Human Development Index. It's a per capita energy consumption. You notice that we share a lone position way out there at the end of the curve. But notice how flat that curve is on top. That people using roughly half the energy we do, the Human Development Index, which is life expectancy, educational level, relative income, is about the same as ours, using only half the energy we use. As a matter of fact, that's where Europe is. They use half the energy we use. The next chart looks at some of the same phenomena in a different way. This is how happy people are with their station in life. Now, here we are, using the most energy. That's on the bottom, how much energy you're using. We use the most energy, and we're pretty happy about things, aren't we? But notice how many countries, I think there are 22 of them, that feel better about their quality of life than we feel, using some of them only half as much energy as we use. Now, on both of these curves, you have to get back down to about here, which is about 1/3 as much energy as we use before you start falling off quickly in these indices or in your perception of quality of life. The next chart looks at our energy consumption. Where does our energy come from? We've been talking about oil, but we're getting energy from a lot of other sources too, from natural gas, most of it from oil, from petroleum, from coal, from nuclear, about 8%, which is about 19% of our electricity. This is total energy production, not electricity. But 19% of our electricity comes from nuclear. If you don't like nuclear, drive down the road tonight and note that every 5th house and every 5th business would have no lights if we had no nuclear. So it's a little wedge in there, 6%, which is renewables. Just 6%. And notice, well, hydroelectric is a big part of that. Biomass, that's the paper industry and the wood industry burning byproducts and so forth, and waste energy. Instead of putting it in a landfill, you burn it. Geothermal, that's true geothermal, tapping into the molten core of the earth. Wind and solar, those that are hyped, look how tiny they are. They have huge potential for growth, but for the moment they're pretty small. The next chart shows us something interesting, and that's about efficiency. The bar on the left, looking at incandescent lights. My wife got a few chickens recently, and she put a light bulb over them to give them heat, because about 90% of all the energy from the light bulb, more than 90%, goes to heat. But if you use a fluorescent, look at it, enormously more efficiency in the fluorescent. And if you go to an LED, look at the ratios in LED. I have an LED flashlight. I forget when I put batteries in it. You notice most of the cars, the new cars in front of you, have LED lights.